Okay, we're going to talk about assignments from booklet 2. Book 2, which is entitled Borrowing. And what we're going to do is talk about how to figure out in this session here an amortization table. Now, amortization is a reference to making payments on something for which you have borrowed money. So we need to define a few terms and talk about a few basic mathematical concepts here. And then we'll jump into the math because you will have some problems that you do that show how much you're paying per month and so forth. So before we get too far ahead, we want to define a few terms. And so notice on page 11 in book 2, there is a formula, page 11, and it's this one here you see on the board. A equals P multiplied times R, and then 1 plus R inside the parentheses to the n, over 1 plus R to the n minus 1. Now, at this point, don't sweat the formula. At the end of the day, you're just going to be able to plug numbers in. I think the tougher part is not so much doing the math on a calculator, and by the way, you do need a function calculator to do this. It's knowing how to set it up. So before we do that, though, we want to talk through, what do these letters mean? Well, A is the amount we're trying to figure out. What is the amount you're going to pay monthly on a good that you purchase? Whether it's a car, making a house payment, whatever. Okay. Now, so in order to find that number, you have a P, and P is principal. Now, principal is the initial loan amount. So if I borrow $4,000 to buy a car, 4,000 is the principal amount. That's the amount I'm borrowing. That's what we're trying to pay off. Of course, interest is the over and above amount that you're going to pay on that loan. That is the P. P is for principal. You have a little r. And that's the interest rate. Interest rate per period. Trying to find out this actually gives you, if you will, the cost of the money over time. How much is it going to cost you to borrow that $4,000 or whatever amount you borrow? The interest rate period or over X amount of time that you're going to carry the loan. And then N total number of payments. So if you are making monthly payments on a 3-year loan, so you have a $4,000 loan over 3 years, you'll make those payments monthly. And this is pretty important to understand when you set up your amortization formula. So if I have a 3-year loan, 3 years is 36 months. So if I'm doing a formula based on a 3-year loan, my end value would be 36. Okay. Now, I've just been throwing around some theoretical numbers. We'll actually get into some actual numbers that were given to you on page 10 of your book. So if you have it open to page 11, page 10 is just to the left there across the page. But I want to point out a few things that you need to bear in mind before we get into plugging in numbers and doing math. The first thing that you need to recognize is that a percentage is a reflection of x over 100. Okay. So if I'm going to write down a number in terms of a percentage, then I have to recognize that that number is so many 100. So for example, if I take out a loan at 7%, numerically, I would display 7% as 0.07. 0.07 is 7%. It's the same as saying 7/100ths, the same thing, 7%, and so forth. Now this number is important because you're going to start, when you get to your interest rate, you're going to start with whatever that number is. And so just realize that that is what you're talking about, percentage. Now, before we jump into this formula, I'm going to say something that I think you can run this back. If you need to run it back, but this is really key. And it's usually the point that students get hung up on when they start calculating the amortization. And that is, you have to know what the interest rate is and recognize that the interest rate is going to be divided by 12 if you're making monthly payments. It's got to be divided by 12 in order to figure out your R value, whatever that R number is. So in other words, and this is what produces all of the really big numbers, okay? Or not big numbers, you have a 0.00 something, you have all kinds of numbers. Now we're going to take it out to 9 digits. I know it's kind of a pain, but that's just how we do it. You take the numbers out to 9 digits, 0.003333, whatever the number might be. But to find our R value, you know what our principal is. That's the amount we're borrowing. To find the R, you have to take the percentage rate and divide it by 12. Now, if I'm borrowing something at 7%, and I divide that by 12 because there are 12 payments at 7%, I'm going to come up with a number 0.0058333333, 9 digits. You say, well, that's a lot of digits. It is. But that's how you find the R value. So once you start plugging numbers into the formula, if your number was 7%, if the rate of borrowing was 7% annually, you have to divide that by 12. Putting in, instead of 0.07 here, you're going to be putting in 0.0058. So it's important that you remember that when you plug in the R. And if you can remember that, it's simply dividing by 12 because you make your payments monthly. And there are 12 months in a year. So 7% a year divided by 12 would be whatever that number comes up to. So that is our formula. What I'm going to do then, and I've already done the math on this, we're going to work through the first problem from activity 2.4. Now, as it says on 2.4, figure out the average monthly payments for the same purchases shown in activity 2.3. And 2.3 we did earlier. And so you have to come up with an amortization on each of these. Now, before I do want to say one thing, just add this before we get into the numbers. What an amortization table does is to allow you to make equal payments every month. You may be making the same payment every month. What the formula allows for is to adjust the payment in such a way as to make it the same every month while you're paying down the principal. What that means is, using my example earlier, if I borrow $4,000, I'm paying down the $4,000 as I go. I'm also paying interest on that. So in the end, I'm going to pay significantly greater amount than $4,000. Depends on how many payments I make and so forth. But what the formula allows us to do is to come up with the same number every month, because then we like that because we can plan around how much we owe on the bills that we have to pay every month, and so we're going to pay X amount on the car or whatever it is we borrowed money for, our house, and so forth. We don't want that number to vary. So the amortization allows you to do a calculation which will give you the same payment every month. You're paying down the principal as you go. In other words, you're going to pay off that principal amount, and you're going to be making the interest payment. That's what this formula does. Now, one other thing I'll say, and then we'll put the numbers up. You can plug numbers into a calculator, one calculator online. You can find them all over the place. When you Google it, I recognize that. 99% of people probably never even consider performing an amortization anymore. I understand that. The reason we do this in class is that we want you to be exposed to, at least in principle, what is happening with the formula and how the calculations work. You could actually, if you went out and got a loan for something, you could actually calculate what your monthly payments would be. You wouldn't necessarily include any fees that the lending party would charge, but you know what your monthly payments are in terms of the principal and interest. Okay, so that's what we're going to figure out here. So, get my eraser here. And we're going to start plugging in numbers.